So without further delay, we will go ahead and get started, and I will introduce our panel members. Okay, sitting down here on the end, we have Pastor John Sugatan. And Pastor John serves at the Prince of Peace Lutheran Church, and they do a lot for the homeless community there. It is located on Race Street and over the Rhine, and he's been serving there for 13 years. However, he's only been ordained as a pastor for the past 2 years. The Prince of Peace serves the homeless, the poor, and the downtrodden over the Rhine in Cincinnati, and they have a ministry that specifically services the homeless. It is called the Bridge Ministry. They're also a cold shelter, and for those of you who joined us last year, you should remember the cold shelters only operate during certain months in the winter, and they allow the individuals experiencing homelessness to come in and stay warm for the night. They also have some other ministries, including they have 3 worship services, some Bible studies, kids' church. They have tutoring programs and a whole lot more. Pastor John also serves 2 other nonprofit ministries that serves the inner city. One of them is Building Hope in the City, Cincinnati, and Welcome Home Collaborative. He's originally from the inner city of Chicago. He's multiracial, being of Filipino and Irish descent. Pretty cool. He has been married to his wife Barb for over 30 years, and they have 3 children, Matthew, Alicia, and Joshua. Pastor John. All right, next to Pastor John is Joanne McIntosh from the Drop-In Center. She is a licensed social worker for 20 years, working with many populations and cultures over the years. For the last 12 years, she has worked with the homeless, including veterans, families, and individuals. She started with the Drop-In Center in December 2014, and before that, she supervised one of the 5 family shelters in Hamilton County. Joanne is the housing manager with the Drop-In Center, managing the rapid rehousing programs and their shelter day program. Joanne McIntosh. Down here on the furthest end, we have Benita Campbell from Lighthouse Youth Housing Opportunities. She is the director there and has served in this capacity since July of 2013. She began her tenure there at Lighthouse Youth Services 23 years ago. In 1991 is the agency's first foster parent recruiter. Benita spent the majority of her career in Lighthouse and foster care, eventually becoming the division director. In 2007, the Self-Sufficiency Division was combined with the Foster Care Division to include the Independent Living Program, preparing older teenagers for independence as they are emancipated from the child welfare system. Benita continued in the capacity of Division Director for the Foster Care and Self-Sufficiency Division until assuming her current role. Benita is also a licensed social worker in the state of Ohio, has a bachelor's degree in psychology, master's science degree in criminal justice, with a concentration in juvenile rehabilitation, both from the University of Cincinnati. In her current role, she manages a staff that consists of 12 licensed social workers and case managers who provide housing and case management services to approximately 150 youth ages 17 through 24 living within the greater Cincinnati community, a housing staff which includes a full-time mover, office coordinator, assistant director, and 8 resident managers. Everyone, please give a round of applause for Benita Campbell. All right, and the lovely lady here is Anna Warpenberg. She is a social worker for the Greater Cincinnati Coalition for the Homeless. For those of you who were here last year, you might recognize Anna. She manages individuals who are or have previously experienced homelessness and distributing the newspaper called Street Vibes. She also serves on the AmeriCorps Public Ally Alumni Group and has recently began working with the End Slavery Cincinnati. And for Anna Warpenberg. Mike Morosky, who also joined us last year from Community Matters in Lower Price Hill. You guys will probably remember Mike. Everybody liked his cool hair, right? Okay, he was not able to make it with us today. He's been sick for the past 3 days. So he's very, very sad to not be able to be here, and we will divide the students who are going to work with Mike up into the other groups. And then last but not least, I am very excited to have Lauren Lovett. She will be joining us here probably in about 10-15 minutes. She went to the wrong church, And Lauren has been with the Speakers Bureau at the Greater Cincinnati Coalition for the Homeless since 2009. You had asked last year that we try to bring someone back who's actually experienced homelessness, so that's why we're excited to have Lauren. She experienced homelessness as a child and uses the Speakers Bureau to educate the community about child homelessness. She hopes that sharing her story will help bring an end to homelessness. Currently, she's pursuing a degree in communications and sociology at the University of Cincinnati, and she hopes to continue her motivational speaking as a career. All right? Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate all the valuable time that our panelists have given to us. This is a volunteer that they are doing for you, and you really should take advantage of the wisdom that you have sitting in front of you and learn as much as you can. So I will also kind of be back and forth between moderator, and I will also sit with the panelists, because our homeless liaison that was with us last year, Matt Pining, remember he answered all the questions about homelessness in Northwest and Coleraine and the homeless students in our district. He was unable to make it because he is also the testing coordinator for your district, and you know that there's a lot of important testing going on right now. But he was so gracious enough to answer the questions that you submitted in advance. And when you ask those specific questions, I will read his responses for you. I won't probably be able to answer any follow-up questions, but I can tell you what he has to say about your questions about homelessness in the district. All right, let's get started. So I am going to sit with our panelists there at the end, and I will call up the individuals who are going to answer the questions. And I will pass this down to our panelists. Do you mind? And then if at any time you really want to tackle or answer a question, just kind of give it one of these and we'll pass it up and down the row as necessary. Okay, who has question number 1? Come on up. Introduce yourself, tell us your name, what middle school you're from, and then go ahead and ask your question.
I'm DJ Fox from...
Here you go, DJ. Come on down here. Use the mic for me.
I'm DJ Fox from Coleraine Middle School, and our question was, are homeless children able to participate in extracurricular activities? And if so, is transportation provided by the shelter?
Thank you.
I'll tackle that one. One of the problems that we see for homeless children is that it becomes very difficult sometimes because they don't have transportation and or resources financially, and as well as support from family members or other caregivers that can get them there. So transportation becomes an issue, as well as often financial resources to participate in those activities. The other thing is often they're pretty transient. So in terms of where they're staying at a particular time, can they get to the different activities that may be in a different location? If they're getting back late at night or later in the evening, can they get there? So one of the things that Lighthouse has actually been tackling in sort of our strategic plans is trying to make sure that homeless youth do have access to those activities as a way of sort of stabilizing their lives and actually ending youth homelessness as one of our strategic plans as we move forward.
Okay, from a district perspective, Mr. Pining said that any children in the district who have been deemed homeless by the local liaison has every opportunity to participate in any and all extracurricular activities as would any other student in your school. Most activities take place right after school ends, so transportation is handled by the team. If when the activity ends and the student needs transportation home, even if that entails a shelter, the school district can work with agencies to look for ways to assist in making that happen. The school district will do what it can to coordinate or make an effort to remedy the situation. All right, question number 2.
Hey guys, I'm Alex from Coleraine. You know, oh God. What are you laughing at? You can't laugh at me. Anyway, how many homeless children do we have in our district?
I can touch on that as far as, I can give you the information for more of the city than the outlying area, but registered in family shelters in 2013, it was 2,458 children in the school district, mostly Cincinnati schools.
Okay, and specific to Northwest, Mr. Pining says, although this number is constantly fluctuating due to their circumstances, they have identified and worked with 76 students throughout the course of this school year. 76 at Northwest District.
And the statistic that I have for Cincinnati public school districts is 1 in 10 children are experiencing homelessness. And that homelessness can look different. It can be that person is staying in a shelter, or something we'll touch on a little bit later is homelessness that doesn't take place in a shelter. It's called couch surfing in like a really general way, where someone doesn't have an address of their own. They're staying with their friend, they're staying with their grandma, they're staying with a relative. So that number is 1 out of every 10 children, which is pretty high.
Thank you. Who has question number 3?
I'm Matthew Moore from Coleraine Middle School. And do most homeless children get to stay with their families, or are they taken by social services?
Thank you.
Because I used to manage one of the family shelters, I can tell you part of it is social service doesn't really want to take the children from their families. But if they're homeless and they're living in a shelter, they're going to leave them with their family. It's a different story if they're living in a car or an abandoned building, but when they're living in a shelter, they're going to stay with their family. That's what we work for, is to move the whole family into another apartment.
Mr. Pining says, by definition, all students have the ability and do remain with their families. There are times when the situation may dictate that a child go live with another family member due to their circumstances. However, once a student is taken into custody, they are then placed with a foster family, and having that placement no longer qualifies the student as homeless. Question number 4.
I'm Lindsay Scott from White Oak Middle School, and my question is, on average, does Northwest have more or less homeless students compared to other districts?
Okay, Mr. Pining says it depends on the district and that can change from year to year. Large urban districts service more families who would qualify for protections under the Homeless Act. Question number 5.
Hi, I'm Evan from White Oak Middle, and our question are, what are some of our, or any general school district's responsibilities when it comes to students who are experiencing homelessness?
It's sort of, the government has laws, so each school is going to have sort of rules that they go by, and I lost my place here. But they're going to make sure that children are kept in their school, especially the Cincinnati Public. If you are going to one specific school and you become homeless, Cincinnati Public has a program called Project Connect, and they're going to make sure that that student gets to go back to their school. You may live in a different school district when you're in the shelter, but they're going to make sure that the student goes back to their own school so that at least their school life is going to be kind of the same. Does that make sense?
There's a federal law called the McKinney-Vento Act, which requires that, and that's kind of what Project Connect functions within. It's a federal law that requires that youth who are homeless can go to their home school, and that schools have to allow homeless youth in the school without sort of delaying their enrollment within the school and allowing them educational access without impeding their enrollment into that school and delaying that process. There's been a lot of talk within Hamilton County in general about educating districts more about that act and how to access student records and not delaying that process. I would say that in the state of Ohio in general, we've been a little bit behind in terms of educating our public school systems about that act and really pushing that forward, but the federal law is out there and it's called the McKinney-Vento Act.
Okay, Mr. Pining says that the general expectations of the district are just to identify families who are experiencing homelessness first and foremost, and then to remove any barriers that might hinder the child from attending school and all that involves on a normal school day. So just making their life as normal as possible, just like everyone else's. Just a friendly reminder, don't forget to fill out your graphic organizer. Your teachers will be collecting those at the end of the day. Question number 6.
Hi, my name is Madeline Williams, and I go to Corrine Middle School. My question is, what roles do violence and narcotics play in the increasing numbers of those experiencing homelessness?
So, in terms of answering this question, what roles do violence and narcotics play? Out of those two, I would say narcotics does play a role. By narcotics, I mean any kind of drug addiction or alcohol as well. So alcoholism is a major daily event that happens in the inner city, especially some homeless, not all homelessness. So that's a misnomer to think that all homeless people are drug addicts or alcoholics. And in fact, the people at Prince of Peace whom we served, I'd say you can't look inside each individual, but I'd say 40 to 50% play some kind of role in that kind of lifestyle. But the other folks are not. But in terms of an example of something that occurs, like for example, there's a gentleman that I know of, I won't give you his name, but he's a crack addict. And he patterns, he structures his whole day around doing crack. So he panhandles on a street close to our church. He sleeps outside, and in the winter months he intentionally gets arrested, so he stays at the Justice Center. Then he gets out the other 9 months out of the year, and he panhandles a certain period of time, especially when people are on Vine Street, which is very popular now. And then he'll, as soon as he has enough money, he'll get his crack, and then everything else falls from there. Crack is the most important thing, and then everything else, food or clothing or whatever, is secondary. So there's lots of folks that have that issue. There's, on the other hand, other folks that don't have anything to do with crack or alcoholism. Quite often, folks are doing drinking beer or smoking dope or whatever at the same time. In terms of violence, I think it's a vast misnomer to think that violence has a role in homelessness. I don't see it. The vast majority of violence that I see in Over the Rhine is pertaining to drug dealers, especially the soldiers on the street. I mean, the guys that you see on the street, not the drug dealers that are back, that are not in harm's way. Those are the guys that are involved in shootings. But the vast majority of homelessness, I don't see violence playing a role in their daily lives, except to the point that violence sometimes is done on them. There's some issues with some young guys and gangs that are beating up homeless folks. I see that from time to time.
So one of the things I want to say about that 50% statistic is that that's for people who are kind of in the over the Rhine area. An important thing to know about homelessness is that the rising demographic, the people that we're seeing more and more are families and children, right? So when we think of someone who's homeless, we kind of think of that person on the street with the sign, flying the sign, right? But that's not the case. We're seeing a lot of the invisible homeless. That's what we kind of call them. So these are the people who are couch surfing. And so my statistic that I have is 26% of people experiencing homelessness use drugs or alcohol. An important thing to know about that as well is that what came first? You know, people become homeless for many different reasons, especially because of the recession. You know, you lose a job, a lot of people are a few paychecks from being homeless, and if someone in your family has a crazy medical bill or someone gets laid off, boom, I mean, you're in that situation. And then sometimes it can be a chicken or the egg question. Do you become addicted to drugs and alcohol and then become homeless, or do you become homeless and then turn to drugs and alcohol as a way of coping? So that's an important question to think about. The other thing about violence is that when we're talking about violence, I think it's exactly right. We think that the homeless are violent, maybe be violent people, but the reality is people are more violent towards the homeless. We have hate crimes that happen all the time around our country where people attack the homeless just because they're homeless in really violent ways. But the other thing around violence I want to talk about was domestic violence. Are we all familiar with what domestic violence is? So these families with children that we're seeing, a lot of the times domestic violence is the reason that they're leaving their homes. And we have a family shelter that is specifically for that type of demographic. Families who've experienced domestic violence who then became homeless because of it. So I think it's a really important question that we just asked. It's really complex, and I think that we just need to break it apart.
I think that's a good way to say it. It's a very complex question, and when I think about violence and drugs among the homeless population, I think about risk factors. And so I think it is definitely a situation where they're at higher risk to experience violence and or drugs. And again, not necessarily that they are using them because they are homeless or that they are actually committing violent acts, but the risk factors for them to be victimized because of the fact that they are homeless. So they're often victims of violence or victims of using drugs because of a survival technique that they have to be that they're involved around or with people that actually expose them to drugs because of different situations they may be in, which again is a very complex and serious topic that would take much longer than the time that we have today. So it's definitely a situation where we need to talk about risk factors that affect the homeless on a daily basis.
So that's a great opportunity for an I wonder, because your question was answered but not fully, and I will. What you might want to go back and do about that particular issue.
I just wanted to say one more thing, because I forgot to bring it up, and I think it's really important to note that heroin is out of control, and over the Rhine in northern Kentucky, and it's also where you are. It's also in Mason, Westchester. I get calls from fathers and mothers who saying their child was on oxys and then graduated from oxys to needles because it's too expensive to do oxys, or they can't get the scripts anymore. So I just want to throw that out there. Heroin is really a problem right now. We need to be aware of it.
I just wanted to add that it's not only are you losing apartments, families losing apartments because of their own addiction. It may not be their addiction. It may be the significant other that they have in the home. And the landlord says, no more, you're out of here. So then they're losing their apartments. So it's definitely a good thing to know who you're around and who you're with. It's important to control that sort of thing.
Okay, so Pleasant Rhine Middle School got here a little late before we passed out the questions, so they didn't get any to ask. So when I call up person number 7, I want you to introduce yourself, and then if you guys want to send someone up, you can also introduce yourself and ask the question, because it was actually their question. Okay, so number 7, who has number 7? We want to give everybody an opportunity to participate today.
could
So-
give them my question if they want. So.
Okay, well, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then if you want to pass it off to someone, they can do the same.
Who's coming up?
My name is Kara Wilson. I'm from Corey.
Thank you. And she has the question for you, so will you pass it off to her? Okay, and then you can pass her the mic, and you can stay or sit down, whatever you'd like to do.
I'm Caitlin from Huzero Middle School, and what criteria must be established to consider a person as homeless? And is this a universal definition, or does it vary from organization to organization?
That's also a loaded question. It often has to do, unfortunately, sometimes with funding issues, depending on how you're going to serve that particular homeless person in terms of ending their homeless episode. So if you're going to provide housing for them, the definition can be determined by a federal source in which you're going to house them. So HUD is federal funding, and they have their definition. Schools may have their definition. Shelters will usually are HUD funded, but it depends often upon funding in terms of what determines a general individual or family to be homeless. That's my simple definition.
You talk about certificate.
I'm sorry, can I talk about it?
You go ahead.
Well, I didn't hear what you said.
Talking about homeless
Oh,
certs?
yeah.
So, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, because I'm not a direct service provider, but in Hamilton County, we have a system for putting in all the information about people experiencing homelessness on a computer, so that different social service providers can all access it, because you're getting lots of different services. So that's called VESTA, and in VESTA, there's this thing called a homeless certificate, and it sounds kind of silly, but it's literally saying you are certified to be homeless, which is an interesting concept. So basically, you have to be living on the street, or you have to be in a shelter to get a homeless certificate. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the reasoning for this is that, shelters and service providers are very limited in their access to funds. And they can only serve the people who have no other options. All of their people that they can live with, all of those options have run out. There's nothing left for them to do but either be on the street or in a shelter. And so then you can get access to a homeless certificate. Once you get that, then you can get different services around the city. But it's very interesting that you have to be on the street or in a shelter to get it. Like at the Homeless Coalition, you come in, you can get any of our services, which are just an address or a cup of coffee or using the phone. You can self-identify with us, but yeah, it's all about the homeless.
So to add they're both, those answers are connected, because if you have a homeless certificate, then that adds data, then therefore is ammunition for coming back to the government agencies to get more funding. So it kind of is like a circle. If we're just giving services to people without getting plugged into that system, it's kind of not helping them. It's not increasing the types of services that we can all offer. Does that make sense? And quite often homeless people come to me, or us all, and they don't have an ID. I don't know how this happens. I can't explain it. But I don't have an ID. I don't have a birth certificate. I don't have a social security card. It got stolen, it got robbed, and lost, my stuff. They don't have a place to put their stuff. So they hide it behind a dumpster or something, and it gets robbed or lost, whatever. They don't have those things, and so they have to start from scratch. A homeless certificate is a really good way to start.
I just wanted to add, and it may be one of those things that somebody may want to research further, but all of the funding within Hamilton County is managed by what's called the Continuum of Care, and all of the homeless services in Cincinnati sort of flow through what's called the Continuum of Care, and we all participate within that system. So that is something that you may want to write down and consider further researching. And there's lots of information about the Continuum of Care and strategies to end homelessness within Hamilton County.
When you get that homeless certification And you can go to a lot of agencies, you may need dental work, and they will work with you because you have that homeless certification. So it's really important that if you are homeless, to get registered so that you can get services other than just a place to sleep.
So Mr. Pining also said, he also referenced the McKinney-Vento Act, and he said that that speaks to the concept of homelessness and what qualifies families for protections under its provisions. The basic roots of it are 3 criteria, and it is, does the individual lack a fixed, regular, and nighttime adequate residence? Each case is looked at against these 3 factors to make a determination of homelessness in the eyes of the law. All right, question number 8. Again, if you will bring it up, and if Pleasant Run Middle School will send someone up to ask it, you can both introduce yourselves.
I'm Jasmine Kenny from Corey Middle.
I'm Satvik Charetti from Northwest Middle School.
All right, and would you like to ask the question since it came from your school?
Why do you think some people refuse to help with shelters and organizations and choose to stay on the streets?
So about 5 years ago, I come to my church and there was a man sleeping on our front doorstep. His name was Larry, and I first got to meet him when I opened the door into him, and he wasn't too happy. But right after that, we became really good friends, and he attended our church service every Sunday morning. We got to be close, and I used to ask him, "Why do you sleep outside, Larry?" And he says, "I used to be incarcerated, Pastor, and I don't ever want to sleep in a closed-in cage." And he says, "Right now, these walls, these buildings, they're my walls, and the sky at night, that's my ceiling." And I always wanted to try being homeless, so I did. This last year, I was homeless in the summer, and then I did it in the winter just to see what it was like with my peeps. We call them our peeps, our folks that are homeless that come to Prince of Peace. And I wanted to see what they experience, and many of them don't want to. I'm not dissing the organization. They're great. I'm just saying they don't want to sleep in the drop-in center. They don't want to go to City House. They have camps. Like in this winter, I stayed in a tent camp. You don't know them, but they're right by a highway. Where there's tree cover, there's tents in there. And there's lots of homeless camps around Cincinnati. I stayed in one of them. And but then in the summertime, I went dumpster diving, got cardboard, and we slept out in the parking lot. So I wanted to see what it's like. These guys and gals, they don't want to sleep in a organized structure. Quite often it's to resist any efforts to change them. I'm just being straight, honest with you, real. So they don't want to join a program. They don't want to have to jump through hoops. These are good hoops they should jump through, but they don't want to do it. They just want to stay what they're doing. And again, I don't see drugs involved or alcohol. They've chosen this lifestyle for some reason. I can't explain to you. We are trying to transform them. You know, I walked in this church. Did you see the sign that said their mission is to transform lives? So that's what we're trying to do, is transform lives at Prince of Peace. And all of us are trying to do that. Some folks feel like their homeless lifestyle is their normal, and they don't want to change.
I would say that no one ever chooses to be homeless. Ever. Ever, ever, ever. And I think something that is hard to compact in this small amount of time is that poverty and homelessness are so interlaced that it's really hard to talk about one and not talking about the other. But there's a lot of reasons to not go to a shelter, and there's not a lot of reasons to not choose to go there. I'm going to tell another story about a man that I knew who built a little shanty across the street from where I work, and it was fascinating because I didn't even notice it. It was in this alleyway, really obviously, but somehow the way that he structured it, you couldn't really see it at all. And so he came in and he said, "Well, if I get a roof on it, will it be mine? Can I stay here? If I just get the roof on, can I stay here?" And we had to tell him, "No, this is city property. You're going to have to go to a shelter." Well, he wouldn't, because his significant other was severely mentally ill. She had a lot of problems and they felt that she couldn't stay at the drop-in center. And a lot of times people just feel like they can't stay at the drop-in center when they can completely stay at the drop-in center. But he didn't want to leave her. He didn't want to have to leave his partner. And so there's a lot of reasons why you wouldn't stay in the shelter. And I think one of them is relationships. Another one is sometimes they're just not that nice to stay in. I mean, you're cramped, you're with a lot of other people who are having the worst day of their whole life over and over again. And it makes it difficult to be in cramped quarters. So I think for us, being on the outside, it's like, well, why wouldn't you just go to a shelter? And a lot of the times it's because, well, it's not really that fun. So, yeah, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Did you want to say something?
I just want to say it's kind of a combination of both of those, and again, a very long discussion, but when you talk about people changing or wanting to change or wanting to transform, there's a process for that as well, and people have to get to that point on their own, and it takes time, and it takes a reason to want to do that, and people just aren't always in that place, and there's sort of a process that people go through to get there. It's sort of like being a middle schooler and changing into a high schooler, or being in elementary school and becoming a middle schooler, and there's a process for all of that and changing, and until people get to that point that they want to get there, they almost have a right to be where they want to be, and I think it is also true that not all shelters are great places to be. Things happen there, unfortunately, that people don't want to be a part of, and sometimes they feel safer out on the streets by themselves. And I always talk to people from my history in foster care to my history now with homelessness, that unfortunately all systems aren't perfect. And we have to acknowledge that and try as we might to get everybody the best services. We don't always do a great job, and we have to acknowledge that as well. And so people don't always get the best at first, and they have experiences that they don't want to always, or aren't ready to reach back into those services, and they have to get to that point where they're ready to do that.
All right, thank you. Who has question number 9?
Nicole. Lauren's here.
Oh, hi, Lauren. Come on up.
Everyone give her a round of applause.
So we did introductions, and we're just tackling the questions that the students have submitted in advance. Did you get to see those?
I have not.
Okay. Okay, we have question number 9, and then do we have someone from Pleasant Run to come ask? All right, if you want to come over here so the camera can see you and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jake Lane from White Oak Middle School. I'm Emily Shy from Pleasant Run Middle, and how can we help as individuals? Specifically, what one thing could we do to help the homeless situation?
Hello, everybody. One thing I think that everyone can do to help the homeless situation is something simple, just having compassion for your fellow man. As homeless people, I used to be homeless myself, and one of the problems that homeless face is the fact that, you know, like we have said before, they're having the worst time of their life. They're actually being in a situation where you're homeless. You have to realize that at this point in time, you might not have friends, family, you know, all the people and the ties that were very close to you are now gone. That's what left you in a state of homelessness. So now you're at a point in your life where you feel like no one cares about you. So just having compassion to show you care, whether it be simple as acknowledging someone with eye contact, where some people all day long as they sit there and be homeless, everyone walks past as if they don't exist. As simple as just saying hi, you know, it might actually not get them out of their situation, but that will make their day-to-day easier if they felt like they were one of us.
Everybody concurs. That was a great answer, and that's exactly what Mr. Pining said as well. So that's a great question. Number 9. Who has question number 9?
10, I think.
It's 10.
sorry, number 10. Who is question number 10?
Hi, I'm Corinne from Corey Middle, and
No, you're on your own.
okay. And what area of Cincinnati has the highest homeless population?
This is why we give the questions in advance.
Lauren?
I'm going to make a guess, just because most of the services are going to be closer to downtown Cincinnati, and a lot of them are going to focus down in that area so that they can get to what they need and what they want.
That's my guess, too.
That's my guess. It's hard, I'm sorry. It's hard to find an answer for this because, like, when we're talking about the definition of homeless, it's just so hard. If someone's sleeping in, like, they're at their grandma's house, it's very hard for us to get that raw data. So that's why it's so hard for us to have a definitive answer for you.
Thank you. Number 11.
I'm Bailey from White Oak Middle School, and our question is, what is the most common cause for homelessness in Cincinnati?
And also a follow-up to that, there was also and also nationally, if you know those statistics.
One of the greatest causes of homelessness is actually two, but I feel like one of the main causes is lack of affordable housing. And affordable housing is 30% of your income. So pretty much if you make $1,000 a month, then $300 a month should be able to provide you with housing, electricity, water, everything that your household necessity is. And when you get out here in the bigger world, you'll understand that does not happen. You know, most apartments, you know, according to minimum wage, you will never be able to afford a two-bedroom off of minimum wage. And that will go into the second reason why we have high state of homelessness nationally as well as in Cincinnati, is because there's not enough money out there. The minimum wage is too low. So those are the main two reasons. But like I said, it always comes down to affordable housing, because if the housing was affordable, it shouldn't matter how much you make.
Also in Hamilton County, which is one of the largest counties in the state of Ohio for children in the child welfare or foster care system, 40% of the youth who age out of the foster care system, who have been in foster care at age 14 and up, will eventually become homeless after the age of 18. So that's a very high statistic, and one that we're really looking at across the state, trying to increase the age of foster care through the age of 21. So that youth will continue to be able to be served by the county and the state systems and be able to continue to receive assistance to increase their ability to be self-sufficient and able to maintain a stable life throughout, through the age of 21, so that at 18, they're not out of the system and on their own, and therefore more at risk of homelessness.
Did you say 40%?
Of the youth who age out of the child welfare system, who have been in foster care since the age of 14.
One other thing I wanted to say about affordable housing and living wage, I want to talk about living wage first. Can you raise your hand if you think you're going to get a job when you're in high school? Who thinks they're going to get like a little part-time job? Wow, oh my goodness, okay, great. If all of you get a part-time job and make, like minimum wage, you will be 7% of the minimum wage workforce. 93% of people who make minimum wage are adults. Who wants to make minimum wage when they're an adult? Okay. So this is the reality of our workforce in the United States currently. A lot of people are working really, really hard all the time, but they just can't make that rent. So Lauren said if you're making a minimum wage, it's going to be around $400. It's going to be an affordable apartment. In Cincinnati, in Hamilton County, it's $728 is your average two-bedroom. So that's pretty crazy. A couple more statistics about affordable housing. In Over the Rhine in the 1980s, when we see this rise of homelessness, because one thing I want to point out to you is homelessness has never existed like this before. This is new. The things that we're seeing now are very new. In the 70s, we had about 350,000 people experiencing homelessness annually. And in the 80s, because of budget cuts to things like affordable housing and social services, we get to the number we're at today, which is 3.5 million individuals experiencing homelessness. That's an incredible jump. And it's because we have lost so much affordable housing, and we can see that in the city here. So in Over the Rhine in the 70s, there were 5,540 units of affordable housing. Does anyone guess how many there are today?
1 million.
No. Over here? Yep.
Less than that.
You're correct, it's less than that. It's 1,120 units. In downtown Cincinnati, there are around 2,000 units. Does anyone want to guess how many units there are in downtown Cincinnati today? I'm not calling on you again. Over here? When Anna Louise Inn leaves, there's going to be 150 units left. It's incredibly crazy. And the thing about affordable housing is that neighborhoods don't want to build. You know, there's a lot of misconceptions about affordable housing. People think it'll bring crime. People think that it'll bring the neighborhood down. And so we're destroying this affordable housing to build new things, and you know that's happening. But unless we can rebuild it in other neighborhoods, more and more people are going to become homeless, and that's what we're seeing in I think every social service agency.
I just want to add really quickly, when you're thinking about affordable housing, because I teach self-sufficiency to people 18 to 24, so I'll start with you at a really young age. When you think about affordable housing, it's not just your rent. So when you think about why these people are homeless, it's also your utilities, it's also your ability to eat. You know, just your basic hygiene supplies and all of those things that you need to sustain just basic living. And when you think about, you also need electricity, you also need heat, you also need water. And those things, it's above and beyond your rent. So that $400 apartment easily becomes $600 to $700 a month. That a minimum wage is not going to sustain you. And then what all of you want at age 16 is what? A car. And it doesn't run by itself. It needs gas, it needs insurance, it needs maintenance. And so all of those things have to factor in. And if you don't have a car, you get places by what? Walking, bike. Huh? A bus. That costs. And buses are even more, teleportation. And he's the scientist of the group. And a bus pass is even expensive. And so a lot of the people, homeless people, can't even afford a bus pass. So you have to factor in all of those other things, and all of that leads to homelessness because you can't afford all of those basic things that you and I may take for granted.
Do you mind passing that down? Thanks.
I just wanted to add a couple other things, all great comments, and I agree with all of them. So just to add on what was said about the number of affordable units in downtown and over the Rhine. So I'm in Over the Rhine, and I'm seeing gentrification going on. You guys know what gentrification is? No. So gentrification is the current thing that's going on over the Rhine, where low-income housing is being converted into high-rise or expensive condos that people in the neighborhood can no longer afford. So gentrification is occurring. Everybody, oh, it's beautiful, it looks nice. Yeah, it does, but the people that are in that area are not being lifted up, are not being supported, are not being, these are children of God as well, but we're discarding them. I'm coming from a Christian, biblical point of view. So the other thing is mental illness. I see a lot of mental illness. And individuals, the way the mental illness works now, someone is brought in, they're brought into deaconess, and it's stabilized. It's to first find out what's going on. Okay, I think they're schizo-friendly or schizophrenic or bipolar or whatever. And then they stabilize it with medication, and then they're released. But there's no long-term assistance, and it's a cycle that occurs. I've seen so many of my folks that are at Prince of Peace, and they come in, they're admitted into deaconess and immediately thrown out in the street. And I feel so bad about it because I feel that what's going on here is the mentally ill are being left on the street to die. Drugs and alcoholism, again, heroin is gigantic. Crack has always been a problem. And the family unit has been decimated in the United States. Again, I'm biblical in nature, but where's their family? The family is a mother with her children, and men are going around having children by lots of different women. There is no family unit. And now and then I do see a family, and I'm so grateful, and I lift them up. It's such a beautiful thing to see a family in the inner city. But the family unit has been decimated, and men have lost their self-esteem. They need jobs, and they have felonies, and I can go on and on. I don't need to take over. The last thing is education. Something should be very near to your hearts. You're in school, and you're here because of a great effort to educate you. Education could be the ticket to escape the cycle of poverty. And we need to lift up the people in the inner city so that they can be educated, so that they can escape it.
All right, we are almost a little bit more than halfway through. You guys are doing a great job. I appreciate the way when we put you on the spot, I can tell you're listening and taking it all in because you are able to answer the questions. We're almost there. Let's see if we can push through to question number 23. It might be close. All right, who is number 12?
I'm Nolan Ensweiler from White Oak Middle School. How can homeless children get an education?
I guess this is me. Homeless children can get an education with the right help. When I was actually a kid, I actually had to experience homelessness myself. My first time experiencing homelessness was with my family, and I really didn't know what was going on, but I had support, and we were only homeless during the summer. And I was able to come back with my family. You know, we might have lost our house and everything in the process, but we moved into a smaller apartment, and I was still able to go to a good school. Now, once I became older of age and went through homelessness as a senior in high school, it was a little bit more difficult because by that point in time, I was 18 years old. And there's a few more services now than there were back then. Back then, the only place I was able to stay at, being 18, was the Drop-In Center, which is the largest homeless shelter in Cincinnati. And thanks to the help of the people who helped me, you know, stay focused and stay optimistic and show me the ropes of what agencies to go through, I was able to gain enough stability and graduate fourth in my class. And the same people who, thank you. The same people who helped me, you know, find these organizations were the same ones who eventually ended up helping me sign up for college and be able to continue my education at UC. So, you know, it is help, but a homeless child doing it alone is not possible. You know, a child is supposed to be dependent, not independent, and in that situation, it's more than just the parents. It's going to take faculty, it's going to take teachers, it's going to take friends, parents. You know, at that point in time when a child becomes homeless, every adult has the opportunity to throw in a cape and become that child's superhero. So it's actually up to the adult to decide if they want to be that child help. And if they are, I'm an example that a child can make it through it.
Question number 13.
I'm Jonathan from Korean Middle School, and what is the percentage of homeless children in Cincinnati?
I can answer that from 2013. There were 2,458 children, 5,813 adults 18 and over. So you're looking at just under 50% of the homeless were children.
I don't know the total number of children just in Cincinnati, but I know that Hamilton County has approximately 800 children in the foster care system on any given day. So there's 800 children removed from their home in the foster care system every day. In terms of just homeless children counted, it's kind of difficult because the homeless children aren't always counted individually. They're generally with their families. In terms of homeless youth that are in shelter, on a given day, they're not really counted as children because they're 18 to 24, so they're actually adults. I'm not really sure what that actual number is.
Are they separated from their families? If they're listed as youth from...
We'll look that up and see if we can get the 2013 number for you.
18 to 24, it was 1,067. But the children rate was what I said. There was 2,458 in the shelters.
So how many in the 18 to 24 in children?
18 to 24 was 1,000.
18 to 24 was
67.
1,067 in the shelters in 2013.
All right, who has question number 14?
My name's Shelby Lutz. I'm from White Oak. Our question was, what are the biggest barriers for homeless people to get back on their feet?
We may have already touched this a little bit, but if you want to revisit it or say something that hasn't already been added.
I think we kind of revisited through the stable housing. I think employment is a big barrier to that, to be able to find employment that's going to sustain that housing. And then for our younger population, the 18, 20 to 24-year-olds, a big barrier is education. Many of them have not completed their high school education or GED, so certainly higher education leads to better employment opportunities. So we're often trying to get them to complete that high school education, GED. And then when we talked about those risk factors, one of the things that we didn't talk about is specifically with that younger population, they start to, unfortunately, they do end up with some criminal backgrounds, and some of it may be minor criminal issues, but it does impede and become barriers to them getting some employment opportunities that might otherwise be available to them.
I think that the most important thing to know that the biggest barriers for the homeless populations are societal. A lot of the times we think about homelessness being an individual problem, the choices that you made resulted in your homelessness, when really it's a societal problem of the housing and lack of affordable wage. A way that we've seen this be reprimanded is in Utah. It's a great example. So the homeless, they cost you as a society money with emergency room visits, with shelter stays. It's expensive. And Utah did a pilot program where they gave every single individual who was homeless a home. It's called Housing First. You give people a home first, and then any other issues that they might have as an individual, you work on once you're housed. Let's take someone who has a substance abuse issue, for example. Do you think it would be easier to kick your substance abuse if you're living on the street every single night, or if you're in a stable house? Stable house, right? It seems pretty simple. So they kicked off that program, and their homelessness numbers dropped significantly. So once again, just going back to that housing first model, housing is truly the way to end homelessness.
I just wanted to add really quickly to all those shelters, and we talked about shelters aren't always the best place, but how do you fill out a job application if you don't have an address? So one thing is even to have a shelter address to put down on an application to get a job is a key. You need an address or to get a P.O. box or something to be able to have an address to even get a job is a key issue for a homeless person. So how do you move forward without just that basic piece of information?
I think the other thing when we were talking about housing, it's really hard to think about, okay, I found an apartment, I have enough money to pay the rent, but the first month I have to pay the deposit also, which is as much as the rent costs. So a lot of people can't even come up with that amount of money to move into an apartment.
One of the biggest barriers for me, personally, when I was dealing with homelessness, to be able to get back on my feet, I was provided with housing. You know, I didn't have to worry about coming up with rent. I didn't even have to worry about coming up with electricity. But I had to change my mindset. my mindset. You know, I had to change the people that were around me. I had to change the situations I was in. So I want to repeat what actually got me into the situation of being homeless. I had to make sure that my mind was set to be focused, to be ready for this new life, this happy life, this life that I wanted. You know, not hanging with people that, you know, were probably getting into trouble, or hanging with people, you know, who don't have the same focus or same goal sets. You have to have goals at the end of the day to get out of homelessness. You can't just be like, I just want a house, and then when I get that, I'm going to be okay. You got to actually have goals and try to work on accomplishing those and change your whole mindset to be able to actually get out of that situation.
It seems like a simple question, but it's pretty complex, because it depends on how you define get back on their feet. What exactly how are you defining that? If you're defining that just not to be homeless anymore, then I think Housing First is fantastic. It obviously is the answer. We do have a Housing First example in Cincinnati, Jimmy Heath House. I toured it a couple weeks ago. Extremely impressive place. So folks are immediately brought in there, whether or not they're alcoholic or drug addicts or mental illness. They get off of the street, and I agree that it's better to be in a home dealing with those issues. But I think what I heard Lauren talking about here is not just enabling, but transformation. So there's a distinction there. We all know this space if you're dealing with homelessness and poor. Enablement, just allowing people to continue with what they're currently doing, and transformation, or we say in the church, sanctification. So changing the things that have caused you to be homeless, whatever that may be. I'm talking more than just financial. I'm talking about the other issues that are behind it. We all are sinful. We all have issues we're dealing with. It's just that it's more apparent with a homeless person.
All right, number 15. This is another one I think we've already touched on, but we'll let you go ahead and ask and see if anyone has something to add.
I'm Tyler Hilgeman, and I'm from Coleraine Middle School. And our question is homelessness a choice?
You know what Anna would say.
I already did. No.
Well, no, homelessness isn't a choice. You know, no one wakes up and say, hey, guess what I'm going to do today? Be homeless. You know, homelessness is not a choice. The people who actually are homeless, you know, would not want to be that way. You know, nobody actually wants to be homeless. We have about 1% of the homeless population who is actually chronically homeless. Some people who actually get help, that regardless whether they get help, they're going to wind up back homeless because they're, like I said before, they're stuck in that mindset, and it's hard for them to get out of it. But most people, the other 99%, will not actually choose to be homeless and will want better for themselves.
So I'm just going to respectfully kind of side on the 1%, because that's who I serve. That's who I see a lot. I see the 1% that you may not want to say they choose, but they're out there and they're not actively trying to get off the street. That's what I see. I don't know if you want to call that choice or not choice, or they're stuck or whatever, but they would rather sleep on cardboard or in a tent than try and do anything else different. Now, in the end, they want to get an apartment. They want to. They're trying, but I'm sorry. I see it's biblical. Jesus said, there will be poor with us always. There's a segment of individuals that are going to be like that, although we want to transform them. And I don't know what else to say about that, except I see that segment, and that's mostly who I deal with.
All right, question number 16. I know this one is really important to a lot of the people in this room, and it might be the focus of their projects when they go back.
I'm Sophia Vick from White Oak Middle, and I asked, how can we, as children and students, help the homeless population in our community?
From my perspective, I think that you need to find a homeless program that you can be supportive to. Whether you're doing a fundraiser or you're collecting socks to take in and donate to that shelter. It's one way.
I think one of the other things is I think Hannah talked about the hidden homeless, and they are sometimes hidden, but they're also sitting right next to you sometimes, and you may not necessarily know. So I think Lauren mentioned sort of that humanistic approach to always being kind to your neighbor, because you never know what they're really going through, and they're not necessarily going to tell you. I have to always reach to my roots in foster care, and people used to always say to me, where are foster children now? When people wanted to be foster parents, and I always said, sitting next to your children in class. And that would always shock people. And I would always go, well, where do you think they are? And they're not hidden away somewhere in a closet, and they're not locked away somewhere. They're right there next to you, and there are a number of homeless children in school, and they're not necessarily going to tell you that they're homeless, and they don't look a certain way. But understand they can be sitting right there next to you. So what is it about you and about your spirit and about how you're willing to reach out and help the next person? Because you're not always going to know, because they're not going to identify that they're necessarily homeless. So what are you doing just about being a helpful person in society and helpful in who you are and willing to reach out and help another person? And then on the advocacy side, one thing you can do is tell one person today when you get home what you learned today. Education is the beginning of advocacy. And then one thing that I really want everyone to walk away with is when we're talking about folks experiencing homelessness, it's really, really important to do person-first language. Does anyone know what that means? Person first. It means you say person first. So you're not going to say homeless person, you're going to say person who's homeless, folks who's homeless, our peeps who are homeless, because that emphasizes that you're a human first, always, and you're just going through a situation. So just even changing your language a little bit can be a great way to educate people around you around this issue.
Okay, question number 17.
I'm Precious Crooks. I go to White Oak Middle. Our question was, what is the life expectancy of someone born homeless? What factors contribute to this?
So I don't have the numbers for anyone born homeless, but someone who is chronically homeless, the people that we're seeing on the street, life expectancy for men is around 47, and for women it's around 43. I don't know if that answers your question.
I think with children, if they're born in the shelters, they're going to be fine as far as being homeless. Now, if they're born on the street, it's a different story, and I really can't address that.
I'd say the life expectancy depends, we can't give an accurate number to that, because that would be dependent on the individual. I mean, if you are homeless, you could be in a situation where you have unbalanced nutrition, probably poor dieting, probably no type of medical care that can help you out if you're sick. It could be different situations that you can endure, but if you're actually in that situation where you're born homeless, we imagine that you will get help from that time.
I was just going to add again, if you're in a street situation and an abuse and neglect situation, that would be hopefully where, again, children's services would get involved, and so that child would be taken care of and put in a safe environment where then life expectancy should not be any different than yours would be.
All right, question number 18. We're almost there.
Hi, my name is Jake Cosgrove. If you were to give a $100 gift card to someone who is homeless, what place should the gift card be for, and why?
I would say Kroger. Because you can get a place where you can get everything, food, socks, a superstore, is that what they're called now?
Yeah.
Where you can get just anything, all basic needs can be met, not like Subway or somewhere like that where they can't get everything that they would need, so a little bit of everything in a one-stop shop.
I completely second that because people aren't just going to need food. I mean, if you're a woman, you're going to need sanitary items. If you are living outside, you're going to need batteries. You can't buy those with food stamps. So, I mean, these are the everyday things that you don't really think about, but they're a reality for those experiencing homelessness. So a one-stop shop, totally agree.
I would definitely say a Kroger or a Walmart, just because, everything you can eat is in one place. I remember when I was going through my homeless situation, I didn't have socks, and I mean, literally, my shoes had a hole at the bottom of the shoes, and I didn't have any socks. And I was trying to go to school like that. So when the organization stepped in, they actually gave me a gift card for Payless, and I started crying. They're like, "What are you crying for?" I'm like, "Now I can go get me some socks." So something as simple as that, could actually help somebody and actually make their day. So yeah, if I had a $100 gift card, Walmart would be my best bet, be my best friend.
When we have our cold shelter in the wintertime, we ask for 5 things, because everybody always asks us what we want. And we say socks, gloves, coats, hats, scarves, winter blankets too, blankets. Because blankets, what happens with the homeless, they're always stashing them somewhere, and they're always getting wet or smelly, and so they need you always need those things over and over. The only thing about the $100 code card, I just wanted to add, is that I try really hard not to tempt someone to use it on alcohol. I don't know how you're going to avoid that, but because Kroger and Walmart got alcohol, but somehow if you could stop that, that's the only thing I would caution you on.
Question number 19.
My name is Ace Aaron Schwender, and I'm from White Oak. Who compromises the largest population of homelessness in Cincinnati?
That would be families with children.
Some of the statistics will show men, adult males.
I do know, just as recent as yesterday, there is a growing population of the younger youth, ages 22 and up, showing up in the shelters.
Okay, thank you. Question number 20.
Hello, my name is Anna Lou. And my question is, what does our community, Corrigan Township, do for its homeless population?
All right, from a district perspective, Mr. Pining says if you have to ask that question, then the answer must not be enough. And that would be a great project for school-age students like yourselves to take on in school. What is our community doing, and what else could we do to help out? Okay, question number 21.
Hello, my name is Molly Rotz, and I'm from Corrigan Middle. What percentage of homeless people are able to turn their lives around and not be homeless anymore?
Well, what I can tell you is as a continuum in Cincinnati or in Hamilton County, we receive about $16 million from the federal government. And we receive those funds based on statistics of how we score across the country, and we continue to get about $16 million every year from the federal government. So from a national standpoint, we're doing pretty well in terms of meeting those target numbers. But that spreads across our continuum of serving thousands of people every year. So each of us serve a very different population, and it'd be hard to say how many actually every year do, because we're broken down by the specific populations and demographics that we serve. So I could only speak to my demographic, as I'm sure each of our panelists can speak to theirs.
I think it's worth saying that just because someone exits homelessness doesn't mean that they can't re-enter, because when we're talking about going from the bottom, it's like it's a stepping ladder of getting each service. Like we're talking about the homeless cert, then you can get your ID, then you can get your social security card, then you can get a phone, then you can get You know, it's a really gradual step, and it's really easy for people sometimes when maybe the services pull out after 6 months or 9 months or however long their program is, to kind of go down this ladder again. Because like I said, poverty and homelessness, they go hand in hand. People are 1 to 2 paychecks away from homelessness, so it's really easy to kind of slip down.
All right, question number 22.
My name's Gabby, and I'm from Colerain Middle School, and my question is, are there any homeless shelters in Colerain Township, and if so, where are they located?
All right, Mr. Pining says shelters specifically designed to assist those experiencing homelessness do not exist in Colerain Township. Most of our families experiencing homelessness under the law are families living with other families, referred to as doubled up, and they're also living in hotels. Okay, and then the last question is multifaceted. There's actually 4 questions embedded within one. So why don't you pick out of those 4, why don't you pick the one that you really, really, really want to know the answer to? And then is the pizza here?
The important question.
I'm sorry.
That's the important.
Is it yes? Okay, all right. So we're just a little bit behind, but not much at all.
Hard to pick? Maybe one that we haven't answered already? How about the last one?
All right, so my name is AJ Lewis, and my question is, how and where do they bathe, use the restroom, and sleep?
If it's not in the shelter.
I have seen so much, especially around the Clifton areas, which are right above over the Rhine. They seem to have a big homeless population that is in Clifton now. And people that I see bathe use public restrooms. They might go inside the restaurant of a public restroom to be able to bathe. As far as sleep, they're in abandoned buildings, they're in cars, they're in underpasses by bridges. They're at a friend's house, sleeping on the couch. They're sleeping pretty much anywhere they possibly could sleep. They're couch surfing, and that's how they're pretty much managing right now.
So when I was homeless for those couple days, I followed the routine all my peeps did, and that is we take our showers at Mary Magdalene House on Main Street and over the Rhine. So to do that, just to let you know how that works, if you want a good number, you have to put your name on a clipboard the night before. There's a little slot in the door, you put your name on it, and then you got to be there in the morning at 7 a.m. So you go to City Gospel for breakfast, and then right after you got to walk really fast over there because they hand out the numbers, and you want to get a really good number. 1 to 10 is great because you take a shower right away. So the Mary Magdalene House is run by Brother John Carlos, been there over 20 years serving the homeless, and the sign on the wall says, "Dignity is the beginning of hope." It's a beautiful thing. So you take your showers there, otherwise you couch surf, you do it in other places and so on. But that's the main place in over the Rhine. And then when you sleep in the winter months, you got the cold shelter, otherwise you're outside tents or in the drop-in center or other shelters of that nature.
I know you all probably touched this, but yes, there is some places to sleep, but the biggest homeless shelter in Cincinnati we have is the drop-in center, which only has 222 beds versus homeless at any given time of night. So you got a lot of people that are outside and a lot of people that are couch surfing and going from different places throughout the week, possibly.
Lighthouse Youth Services does operate a shelter specifically for 18 to 24-year-olds called the Shakely Center for Youth, and we do operate a day service where youth can come in off the streets who are not living in the shelter during the daytime, and they can shower. They can also come in for a meal. And we also offer some case management services, so they can get on the computers, they can look for jobs, they can get assistance with housing even if they're not living in the shelter as well. But the most important thing is they can come in for meals and showers every day. They can also do their laundry there during the day if they have clothing that they want to wash and things like that during the day.
All right, that concludes part one of what we have scheduled for you today.